Now I continue dealing with an impossible reconciliation. On yesterday, I began dealing with the matter of public education, and you could call that public indoctrination. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So any system, whether that be a system of education or whatever you might attempt to call it, that doesn't begin with the fear of the Lord is certainly not going to produce wise children and a wise offspring. That is an impossible reconciliation. Godly wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, we are to seek it at any cost. The failure of our society is in large part due to the secular emphasis of education. The educators want the civility that comes with being a Christian. They want the manners and the courtesy that Christian character produces, but they want it without any obligation to the Almighty. Well, those two things cannot happen. They want the civility of a civilized society based upon Christian principles, but they want it without any obligation. Therefore, they are then free within themselves to take what they like and discard the rest. The problem is, this is like trying to have your cake and eat it too. If you eat your cake, you don't have it. And if you have it, then you have not eaten it. You can't have it both ways. The removal of Jesus Christ from our social dialogue and the secularizing of our education system with all of its anti-biblical doctrines. Now, I'm afraid the educational system today is not unscriptural, but is actually anti-scriptural. They teach the anti-biblical doctrines of evolution, humanism, and all of this has produced a people who live lives that are worse than dogs. They have no system of values. They look at human life cheaply. Look how many times in the last year I've looked on the news and seen a wanton attack on a citizen minding their own business, an attack on the subway or an attack on the sidewalk. I saw the other day a video clip on the news where a lady EMS worker was grossly, tragically murdered and stabbed, I guess, 30 times by a perpetrator on the sidewalk. The woman had done nothing to provoke it, and there lost her life. I guess she had no idea when she left her home in the morning that she would never return, but she was killed before she could get back home. Christian education is partly for the purpose of insulating the minds of our children from humanistic doctrines and instilling in them a true Christian philosophy. I don't accept the idea that even in the Christian school system we need to introduce the young people to humanistic thought and unbiblical and anti-biblical thought so that when they go out and face the world, they'll be prepared. I don't find that in the Bible. In fact, I find where Moses forbade the children of Israel from having any of the pictures of Egypt or having any of the books brought out of Egypt. Some would say that Moses was the product of the Egyptian education system, but I don't think that's entirely the case. You see, Moses was reared by his own mother and was tutored to follow Jehovah and not the pagan gods of the Egyptians. This had a bearing on Moses' rejection of the Egyptian way of life, choosing rather to suffer affliction with his people, the Jewish people, the people of God, rather than to have pleasure in sin for a season. Daniel, as a teenager, was carried away into Babylonian captivity, but there Daniel, even made a eunuch, was able to withstand the temptations which Babylon and its heathen system of education offered to him. Nowhere am I told that young Daniel, as a young boy, was taught heathenism and paganism and the pagan idolatry of the Gentiles. In fact, the opposite would have been true. The rabbis and the priests would have been preaching against the paganism and the heathenism of the Gentiles. When he arrived in Babylon and was there confronted with heathenism and the paganism of the Babylonians, Daniel was well able to withstand the temptation which Babylon and his heathen system of education offered. In fact, Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and I would say that there are probably others that are unnamed, from Jerusalem excelled in Babylon and were recognized for their academic and spiritual ability. Why in the world should Christian education have the idea that Christian education has to secularize in order to be accepted among secular institutions of higher learning? This clearly illustrates that side by side, Christian education will always outperform secular education in any secular field. They say, but those children, they went to school up there and all they taught them was the Bible. And they preached to them every day in chapel. And how are they going to be able to do calculus and trigonometry? Or how are we ever going to have engineers and people like that come out of Christian education? Well, there were 4 of us that palled around in school when I was at Tabernacle Christian School there, and 4 of us, and we were typical teenagers. We didn't do a whole lot of malicious stuff, but we were generally in trouble of one sort or the other. I look back now and laugh at some of the things we did, and I think some of our teachers probably laughed at us for some of the things we did. But 2 of the 4 of us became practicing attorneys. One of them, my first cousin, is a doctor now in Phoenix, Arizona, a pathologist. And I became a Baptist preacher. All of us have not only college education, but beyond, all 4 of us have postgraduate work and doctorates. And we were the product of Christian education. And I would hope that I know as much about real estate law as any realtor in the state of South Carolina, and yet my bachelor's degree is in theology, not in business. And yet I hope I can quote the law back to him more quickly than he could ever quote the law, real estate law, to me. This clearly illustrates that side by side, Christian education will always outperform in any secular field, secular education. Back in the 1920s, J. Gresham McShane stated, "When one considers what the public schools in America in many places already are, their materialism, their discouragement of any sustained intellectual effort, their encouragement of the dangerous pseudoscientific fads of experimental psychology, one can only be appalled by the thought of a commonwealth in which there is no escape from a soul-killing system." That was stated 100 years ago by J. Gresham McShane. 100 years ago, he lamented the dangerous pseudoscientific fads, evolution and anthropogenic global warming, transgenderism, that I'm not the sex that biologically that I was at conception, but that I can be either male or female or be nothing. The only escape from this system today is in the handful, just a small handful of Christian schools that are positively biblical in philosophy, and there are fewer students that are homeschooled. You see, the problem with Christian education is even the faculties in Christian education are the product of society, and as society continues to go downward and leftward and more pagan and ungodly, the pool we have to draw from becomes more and more influenced by society. A Christian school is no better than its faculty, and the faculty is really no better than the textbooks they're using and the schools they attended. So if the tinge, the infection, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, and if the infection of leftism and liberalism has infected the universities where the faculty members attended, then ultimately Christian education may only be marginal at best, marginally better at best than what I'm dealing with here, a true biblical education. My granddad will be here on the program tomorrow for Saturday, and I'll be back, the Lord willing, on coming Monday.
Write the Bright Spot Hour at Post Office Box 4, Greenville, South